Thank you very much. Next up, we have Chris Sells. Chris is a senior product manager at Google, and today Chris will be answering your questions on product management and all things Google related. You can still ask your own questions via the link in the chat. So welcome, Chris. And perhaps before we get into the questions, you could just give everyone a quick rundown of your background and how you came to be where you are.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I've been at Google for about 6 years. My first 3 years were PMing the end-to-end experience for the cloud developer on our GCP product. I spent a year in Android working on Jetpack, and then I've spent a very pleasant last 2 years doing Flutter work, where I'm responsible for, among other things, the end-to-end developer experience for Flutter. So if there's anything you don't like there, blame me. It's my fault. And before coming to Google, I spent 20 plus years as a contributing developer to the Microsoft and Windows developer community, including 3 years at Intel, 8 years at Microsoft, various startups. I wrote various books on various Microsoft technologies, gave short courses, gave conference talks, etc. So that's my background. I don't know how this happened, but I spent nearly 100% of my career on developer-related technologies, which is great because developers are my people. They're my favorite customers. So I'm very happy to have done that and to continue to do so.
Thanks, Chris. So we'll ask some questions from us, the host, but then before that, while we are waiting for the questions from the audience, but there's one question from the audience I want to ask you now. Do you use the block library in your products?
That's a good question. There are literally hundreds of Google developers building products with Flutter. In fact, earlier this week, you might have seen us rolling out the pre-release of the brand new GPay that was built with Flutter. I don't know specifically the individual teams, but I know that for sure Block is being used internally at Google. For the reasons that Felix laid out, which is it's predictable, it's dependable, you know where to put your code, you know where when you talk about separation of concerns, Block makes that really easy to do. So there definitely are teams inside of Google using Block. That said, I'm pretty sure at this point we've got teams inside of Google using all the popular libraries in some various combination, right? So I'm sure we got people using Provider and other things. So yeah, definitely Block and definitely other things as well.
Cool. So for everyone, then we are doing a poll in Slido. Feel free to vote. So the second question I have is, what aspects of product management do you find the most exciting?
Oh, yeah. The thing that I most love is personal contact with developers. I miss going to conferences. I miss giving conference talks. I miss, that conversation that always spins up after a conference talk where, developers want to tell you about how they're using whatever you just talked about and, how they can use it better. So I miss that. On the other hand, I actually tend to volunteer a lot for these kinds of online virtual questions, mostly from a Q&A point of view, because that is, for me, it's pretty direct communication with the developer, right? Each one of these questions that you're asking comes from, a developer in the Flutter ecosystem. And all of that, if I can make even one developer's life better, then that's a good day for me. That's really what I enjoy the most.
Thanks. So the next question is how to become a product manager in Silicon Valley? Like, do people start as a product manager or they can become a product manager from a dev?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. There definitely are, now there's education, there's discipline, there's specializations in product management, formal education in product management that you can embark on. There's lots and lots of books. That said, as many people do it in that formal way, kind of step into it sideways. That's how I got into it. I have an engineering background myself, and I still write code for fun as well. I have, little projects in Flutter that I write evenings and weekends. I like writing Flutter code. But for me, I started becoming a PM. I did the math. It's almost 18 years ago now, which is an embarrassingly long number, or a large number. And it was an accident. I hired on to Microsoft as a technology specialist. It was much more about my engineering background than anything else. But at Microsoft, PM is kind of the catch-all phrase for whatever isn't, an actual SWE writing code for products. And so I was a content specialist, and so that was just another way to bring me in as a PM. And when I moved on to my next job at Microsoft, I was also a PM, but I was hired into a more traditional PM role on that team. And both myself and my boss were very surprised to learn on my first day that I had no idea what it was to be a PM or how to be a PM, or, and so he, instead of firing me, which he could have easily done, he taught me how to be a PM. And then I've been a PM in a very technical PM, but a PM in one way or another since then. So I guess the TLDR answer to your question is there are as many different ways into the PM discipline as there are PMs themselves.
Cool. So I can see like there are a lot of questions from the audience. We'll just ask one more question, then we'll take questions from the audience. So the next one is, how do you prioritize resources when you have two important things to do, but like you can't do them both?
So so there are two ways to think about this. If you've got, two things that are very different, then it's all about, what's the impact, what's the value? And there's two ways to measure value. There's value that you're going to bring to your customers, right? How are you going to make their lives better with whatever this feature is you're thinking about? But then there's also the value you're going to bring to your business, right? Your company. I mean, obviously you're there to do a job to bring value to the company. And ideally, you maximize the value for both. So if you've got, something that's high value and something that's low value, well, you want to aim for the high value one. That said, you also have to take into consideration, the bang for your buck, return on investment, right? I mean, is this thing an easy thing to build that is going to have a high impact and, bring value to the customer and to the company? That's easy, right? You want to do as many of those as possible. On the other hand, the things that are edge case, niche, really hard from an engineering point of view, really long from an engineering point of view, those are the things you want to be super careful about. And so it's, if you've got everything on the high side, hey, it's easy to build, it's fast to build, high value, and then you've got something that, is on the low side, that's easy to make that determination. When it's harder to make the determination is when you've got two things either of equal value, right? They're both high value, they're both relatively easy engineering. At that point, you kind of want to just do them one at a time, and you have to decide which one to do first and which one to do second. The thing that's really hard is when you say, well, this is going to bring a lot of value, but it's really hard. Or this is really easy, but it's going to only bring a little value, right? Then you start have to making judgment calls, right? Do we want to do this quick little thing before we embark on a big thing? Do we want to just say, hey, let's the phrase I hear is, let's put all of our wood behind one arrow, right? Let's go big or go home. And the truth is you balance those things, right? So for example, I mentioned the null safety beta, which we released yesterday. That took a lot of engineers a long time to do. However, it is a huge, huge impact, right? Being able to erase an entire, very common, very difficult to find class of errors at compile time is huge. Now, we've done the hard work, right? Our hard work, which is, designing it, making sure that if once you apply it all the way, it gets to be null safe, building the migration tools, building all the analysis tools for, integration into your favorite editor or IDE. But then there's this whole other bunch of work that has to be done by our users, which is bringing all the libraries that you care about from PubDev up to null safety, and moving your apps over. And again, we provide migration tools, but the migration tools aren't going to rethink your APIs or your designs based on how do we avoid null. What they're going to do is use analysis to go through and say, oh, this is never null. It doesn't have to be nullable. Or this is null. Sometimes it does have to be nullable, which is still much better than, oh, the old semantics are, everything had a invisible question mark. Let's do it that way. That's not very helpful either, right? So we've spent a bunch of time building the migration tools, but we can't redesign things, right? So the impact of null safety is going to be felt, as we migrate things, but also the benefit of thinking about a whole new way to design your app without null and that whole class of errors. That's going to have a large impact over time. So that the value there is large, even though the work is large, right? So I guess the answer is you do a mix. You do a mix of things that have high value, that have a high impact, that take a long time, with, hey, what are the biggest value things that we can do with the smaller set of resources, and making sure that we're always bringing new value every quarter, every release to our customers. So it's always a mix, and that is part of the art of being a product manager, is picking the right mix.
Okay, cool. I think we'll take some questions from the audience, starting with the most voted one. What does a day in the life of work look like for you?
Meetings, largely meetings. I spend a lot of my time in meetings. As a PM, it's your job. The way we think about it at Google is you are kind of the CEO of whatever it is you're in charge of, right? So I'm the CEO of the Flutter developer experience, which means that I have to understand what the customer pain points are in the Flutter developer experience. And as we grow and have new kinds of users, and just the sheer mass of users that we've gained over the last couple of years, you have different use cases and different problem sets and different kinds of things that classes of problems that people have. So it's my job to understand that. And I understand that by talking to as many individual developers as I can. I understand that by working with our developer relations team, who also themselves talk with individuals. And I also do it with our user experience research team. So that's a matter of, they send out surveys, they do customer interviews, user studies, and all of that data helps me understand what are the problems that we're trying to solve for our developers. Then it's my job to sift through all of that data as a team, but fundamentally, what does that mean? What are the most impact? What's the most value we can bring to our customers? What's the most value we can bring to the company? Sifting through all that data and understanding, what are the features? And those features we can't do all at once, right? Or we'd be writing software all the time and we'd never release it, right? You have to do it in chunks and milestones. So we've picked, what's the highest priority stuff? What do we want to do for our next release? What do we want to do for the release after that? So with that, I'm constantly working with our engineers who actually have to do the work, right? Who actually, write the code and fix the bugs. So I work with them on features and how long is it going to take and when can we have it done? And of course, they have to balance their own work with new feature work that they're doing, as well as quality work on the existing features that we've already shipped. And that's a big part of their work. And so I work with engineering to get it built. I work with our project managers in terms of schedules and milestones and releases. And then I work with our developer relations in terms of, where is the content, the code labs, the documentation, the videos, the conference talks to put it in front of our developers, as well as our marketing folks in terms of how do we get, that content, the features we built to a wider audience. But it's kind of me, as kind of pulling all of those resources together end to end from, hey, there's a pain point, all the way to, great, let's not only fix that pain point, but let's let the developer know that we fixed it and put it in their hands. That's where all those meetings are, talking to all those people. And then I also, between meetings, have to do the actual work of writing specs and reading the results of all those studies and understanding what people have to problems with, and of course making time for talking directly to customers like I'm doing right now. That's what my day looks like.
Thanks. I think most devs they don't like meetings, but I think it's unavoidable for a PM.
I don't like meetings either, but there you go.
Cool. So the next question is from Const. Any plans to integrate Kotlin into Flutter? I think this is about replacing Dart with Kotlin.
Well, of course, as you know, right? I mean, if you are writing an Android app, you can write as much Kotlin in the native part of your app as you want, and call from your Dart and Flutter app into that Kotlin code. So whatever mix you want is totally up to you. But if the question is fundamentally, hey, are we going to have different language bindings besides Dart for Flutter widgets or the underlying Flutter engine? I get asked that all the time. I like to think of it as, I don't know if you're familiar with the 5 stages of grief, but we have, which is, denial and bargaining and, depression and eventually acceptance. That's one of the 5 questions of Flutter. What? Dart? Why would I use Dart? It turns out that Dart, not just the language, but the platform, is a key part of the value that Flutter provides. And when the Flutter engine was first built, and we knew we wanted to build the framework on top of the engine, which all the widgets and the layers and et cetera, the team went looking, this is before my time, the team went looking for the language, and they settled on Dart because it provided a unique set of capabilities that in fact makes Flutter Flutter as far as most Flutter developers are concerned, right? It combines the best of, hot reload, which is sub-second, I make a change and boom, I'm looking at the running version of that change while keeping the state of my app. That's a, uniquely Dart feature, because during debugging time, there's a virtual machine and it can just patch these changes and it's super, super fast. Combine that, a fantastic developer experience, with, being able to natively compile ARM code, x86 code, JavaScript code that is native speeds, right? Whatever speed your device runs at, that's what speed your Flutter code runs at. You are generating native code, native to that platform, whatever you're targeting. And to be able to find a language that does both, that's what Dart provides. And Flutter wouldn't be Flutter without Dart. So the short answer is we don't plan on moving it to Kotlin or Swift or Rust or any other language, because no other language provides the best of both the developer experience and the native code generation that Dart provides.
Okay, thanks. The next question is very brief. So PWA versus Flutter, I think maybe they want you to compare the two.
So PWA is an acronym that stands for Progressive Web Application. And the idea with a progressive web app is, hey, I've got, a single page application or a website or some hunk of HTML and JavaScript and CSS that I would like to provide a little bit of metadata for the operating system, either a desktop or a mobile operating system, and say, hey, here's the icon and here's the service worker that downloads things in the background so you can have offline support and this set of metadata so that you can actually wrap a web page with an app frame and make it give it an icon like an app and list it along with all the other installed apps on that operating system. And then you can just open it, double click on it like it was an app, and the address bar goes away and it looks and feels like an app. That's what a PWA is, a progressive web app. It allows you to provide some additional metadata to take a web page and turn it into an app, which is great, because then you can use the distribution technology and the update technology of the web, but it still looks and feels to the user like an app. And there are some famous PWAs. For example, Twitter has an excellent one. Now, where that comes into play with Flutter is that every time you generate a Flutter app and one of your targets is web, you're going to get that metadata, and you're going to get that service worker, and you're going to get that icon. You're going to get the set of resources. So out of the box, without you having to do a thing, every Flutter web app is also a progressive web app, right? It just happens for you. And it's really great, actually, because what that means then is, you're building an app in Flutter, and you can deploy that source code to mobile operating system. You can deploy it to a desktop operating system, or you can deploy it to the web, but they're all apps. And the user can just say, oh, that's a progressive web app. Then I'll press the little plus button, and I'll just install it, and I'll put it on my homepage, or I'll put it on my desktop, or whatever, and it'll just look and feel like an app for me. So Flutter Web plus PWAs, that's like chocolate and peanut butter. They go together very, very well.
Okay, cool. So the next question is, how do you make sure marketing or non-technical teams understand technical challenges?
Yeah, that's a really hard question. So marketing in the engineering world has kind of a bad reputation, right? Marketing is, this idea of trying to sell you something, which is actually not what marketing it is at all, right? Marketing is about awareness. Hey, there's this thing in the world, and if you're a developer, there's this developer tool or technology or whatever, something to make your life better. Marketing is all about, how do we make you aware of that, right? We have this thing. We think you're going to love it. Well, how do we package that and distribute it so that you can find it? That's all that marketing is. And for developer technologies, we've actually we've invented two levels of marketing. We have traditional marketing, where it's a landing page and it's overviews, and it tells you, generally, videos, and kind of gets you excited and motivated to take the next step and get to education. And that education is the deep technical details that that engineers need to know to really evaluate and educate themselves and really integrate whatever the technology is into their daily lives. And we call that that next level of detailed technical marketing developer evangelism or developer relations, right? But they're both marketing. They're both about, let me make you aware of the technology at the right detail level that you need when you need it, so that you can evaluate and integrate the technology into your life. So the way that, here's the key, I will tell you, how do you find technical marketers? That's hard, because just like finding a technical product manager, right? I mean, you have to find somebody that is technical or understands technical things. That engineering background is great if you can find those kinds of people, or just somebody who can really have those conversations and really understand the value, even if they don't write code, that's totally fine, but understand the value of what you're really doing and what you're really bringing to the market for developers, because it's all about that value. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I'll give you the secret when it comes to marketing to developers. This is what I've learned over a 3-decade career working with developers, which is, you need to be upfront and honest about what this thing is for and what it's good at and what it doesn't do well. You have to say, hey, this isn't perfect. It won't solve all of your problems. I have that conversation. I talk to customers all the time. I manage our top customers and partners. And sometimes they will come to me and have a set of requirements, and I'll say, it doesn't sound like Flutter's for you. Flutter's not for everyone, but that's okay. right? There's lots of technologies, there's lots of solutions, there's lots of ways to solve your problems. Doesn't happen very often because Flutter is pretty great. Sorry, I'm a fan, but it does happen, and you just need to be upfront and honest about that. Which is, here's what this technology is great at. Here's what it's not great at. And as long as you do that, you've got engineers. They will love you, right? As soon as you try to pull one over on them and try to convince them that your technology, your solution is for all problems and it's wonderful in all ways, you're done. Right? You might as well be trying to sell them a used car. It's not going to work. You're out. So that's the key to marketing. That's what I've learned in my career. How do you market to engineers?
Okay, thanks. I think we only have a few minutes left. I'm just wondering whether you can take a few more questions.
Yeah, no, that's fine. This is the end of my day, so keep going as long as you want. I'm happy to stick around.
Okay, thanks. So the next one is, are there any plans to support Dart for cloud functions?
Good question. So right now, we're working with a vendor called Invertase that allows you to call into Firebase functions from your Dart and Flutter programs. So whatever language they happen to be written in, you can invoke them. We are also working, and we have for a while, been working with our brothers and sisters in the Google Cloud Platform so that you can write Dart code on your server side and have a full stack. Dart on the client, Dart on the server, same types, right? Serialize them back and forth, make it kind of a more seamless experience. Where we are today, there's a wonderful technology called Cloud Run, which essentially has a range of options, one of which is a Docker image. So you can do it today. You can use Cloud Run with a Docker image that has all the right stuff to run, execute your process written in Dart. You can do it today. Because you have to go all the way to Docker and manually do that, it's harder than it should be. So we are also working to make it much, much easier, where you can just write your Dart file, hand it over to some magic, and then you don't have to worry about Docker or any of that stuff. We'll just handle that for you. I don't have any kind of a ship date. We're in the prototyping stage now, but that is definitely something we'd like to provide people.
Okay, cool, thanks. So I think I'm related to the next question as well. How does one of your projects first form, and what is it? Then how did your team work with the person with the visionary, and how does the UX? How do the UX people come in?
So I think the question is fundamentally, how do we start with, some idea, some vision, some cool thing we'd like to do, and turn that into an actual thing. And we do this all the time, right? So, I'll give you one example, which was last summer, we worked with a Google intern to implement something we'd been designing for a while called the Layout Explorer. The idea of the Layout Explorer is if you're doing a flex layout as opposed to a box layout, if you're doing a flex layout in Flutter, sometimes that doesn't work the way you expect. And the most common way that it doesn't work is you've got that police line, do not cross, yellow and black stripes, and you're like, oh, that's an overflow, right? You've done a flex layout badly, right? And this is us letting you know. The idea of the Layout Explorer was, hey, how do we take a developer from this case where they have an overflow in their code and give them kind of an interactive environment for them to understand what the constraints are for the flex widgets that are working together, and to see, hey, you've got a container this big and you're trying to stick in content this big, and this is why you're having trouble, to be able to poke at it interactively and make some changes and see then, oh, I see where the problem is. I need to go fix my code. And what we did was we went from this idea of, we have this error, we want to show it to someone in an interactive environment so that they can fix it, find the problem and fix it. And so we started with some UI designs, and that's just a fancy way of saying somebody drew some pictures and said, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we had a user experience that did this? And then somebody went, oh yeah, but not, this wouldn't work. We want to do it like this instead. It was collaboration. Then what we do is we go, I'm going to tell you the idealized workflow. It doesn't always go like this, but what you do is you take those mocks and you ask, you do run user studies, and you ask them to solve this problem with whatever the current state of the tools is. In our case, it was, hey, try to solve this layout problem without the Layout Explorer, and we watched what they did. And then at the end of that, we said, hey, what if you had a tool that looked like this? How would you interact with it, right? And they start poking at pieces of paper, or they start describing how they'd interact with some picture, some static image on the screen. And we use that to influence the design. And then what we do is we say, great, let's implement it and see how it works, right? I mean, is this really a useful thing? And so we, based on all of that input, we provide an implementation. As I said, last year, we had an intern who built that over the summer, and we released it in December at Flutter Interact last year. And by the time we had released it, we had gone through a number of initial implementations that we ourselves had dog fooded, and we gave feedback on the live implementations. Then we did user studies to see if people could be successful, and we took those bits of feedback and we put it back into the implementation. And by the time we released it and showed it off at Flutter Interact, it was still a proof of concept. It was still pre-release, but we felt that was enough where people could use it. And we do know people use it. In fact, they use it often enough to give us a pretty popular feedback, which is, this is great. I want this same kind of information for non-Flex UI, for box-based UIs as well. So that's a feature we're busy adding. And then that's essentially what you do, right? You start with a problem. You think about what's a user experience that might solve that problem. And then you just do progressive, richer implementations, right? You go from drawings to working proof of concept to vetted implementation, and you just iterate and you keep improving it until you can put it into customers' hands, and then you keep improving it after that. Layout Explorer is still being worked on and developed, while we still have people who want to use it, and we have more and more users all the time, and B, major feedback from them or from ourselves about how we can improve it.
Okay, thanks. The next question is Xamarin or Flutter, which one and why?
Well, it's funny. I am from the Microsoft world back before I was at Google. And I even wrote an online course about the part about Xamarin that really excited me was when I could take that and not just build logic that was cross-platform, but UI that was cross-platform. So Xamarin Forms. I wrote an online course about Xamarin Forms. I'm not on the Xamarin team, I'm on the Flutter team. So I will let you be the judge of which one I prefer.
Okay, cool, thanks. So the next one is, any easy way or plan to integrate Flutter app to Google Assistant?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Google Assistant right now, the apps you see on your smart display are Flutter apps. They didn't used to be, they didn't start out that way, but they've been updated to be Flutter apps right now. So you're already running Flutter on your smart displays. The question is, how do you, write code to run on your smart displays? That's not a Flutter question. That's a Google Assistant smart display question. So I can't announce any roadmap or futures for that product. But that said, I'd love to be able to write Flutter code that runs on my own smart displays. So there you go.
Okay, cool. The next one is a diversity question. How do you feel Google and its SWEs are doing representing all developers as you build products? From an ex-Googler here.
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing problem across the IT industry. I can't pretend to know the answer. I can tell you that We need to do better, and at Google we work really hard to do better, and we're constantly digging into, how diverse are we? How can we be more diverse in our hires? And we want that on our team, not just actually not at all to meet some kind of checkbox list of, oh, we're diverse, therefore we're great. That's not why we do it. That's not why we care. The reason we care about diversity and the reason we work so hard on it, and again, we have a long road here, is because the more diverse your team is, the more diverse their points of view are, and the more they're able to represent your actual customer base, right? So as always with Flutter or any projects, we want to reach as many customers as possible. And the way to do that is to make sure that we have as diverse a team as possible, so that we have the points of view of all possible customer types that could benefit from Flutter. So like I say, I don't pretend to have the answers, that we do a lot of work in lots of different ways to be more diverse, but we have a long way to go still, as an industry.
Okay, cool. I think we have only 6 questions left. The next one is there any kind of Google supported Flutter development certification program up and coming in the future for those who could use to show for PD? I think I watched the recent fireside chat you did. I think the short answer is no, but you can feel free to elaborate on this.
Yeah, not right. Actually, the short answer is not yet. As we get further down the road, I can absolutely imagine some knowledge-based Flutter certification process. I've heard this question before, as you mentioned. I was just on another program where this question came up. So far, the question I have been having is from developers that say, I want to be certified. And in certain regions of the world, those certifications are more or less important and more or less recognized as being important. But what I haven't heard yet, and the reason it hasn't kind of gone to the area where we would actually go and create such a certification, is I haven't heard that from employers yet. I haven't heard a bunch of employers say, we're having trouble finding knowledgeable Flutter developers, or rather, we're having trouble picking Flutter developers that meet our needs, because we're hiring them and we don't understand Flutter, and there's no certification that says this is a good Flutter developer, and the lack of certification implies somehow it's not a good Flutter developer. So with these certifications, it doesn't do anybody any good if we spin up a certification and they get to say they're a certified Flutter developer, but there isn't an employee that really matters to, right? You need both sides, right? You need the push and the pull. And when I have both sides, I'm pretty sure we'll have a certification program.
Okay, cool. The next question is, what's the best way to work with customers and users?
The best way to work with customers and users is to be open and transparent and sincere. In my experience, this is how I think about it, right? From my point of view, it isn't about, this is again, the difference between, engineering customers and everyone else potentially, which is engineers are a tough breed. We have been doing the same things over and over in different ways for the entire length of the IT industry, right? I mean, for just Flutter, right? Flutter's not the first cross-platform technology, for sure. And part of the other, the 5 stages of Flutter questions I get is, well, haven't we been trying to solve this problem for 20 years? How is Flutter, how could Flutter possibly be different? But what that means is that engineers are fundamentally skeptics, which is, oh, I've heard all this before, right? Why is your solution different? Why are you better? And so it is, in general, a terrible idea to try to trick somebody into using your product. And it's even more of a disaster if you're trying to do that with an engineering audience. So for me, it's always about, hey, we've got this thing, and here's why we've engineered it. Here's the problems we think it solves. If you have these problems, we think it's a great product for you. If you don't, if you've got other problems that we're not focused on, you might want to try it. Let us know how it goes. No guarantees, but being open and honest and transparent with your customers, and trying to make it a win-win. Right? You don't want to have them adopt your product because they have to, right? Or because they were duped or misled in some way. You want them to pick up your product, because they want to, right? They really think it's going to help them. They really think it's going to add value to their lives. You want to make their lives better. And so to do that, you don't want to do anything but be open and honest and transparent with your customers and with your potential customers. That's how I would say, that's how I think about interacting with the customers.
I think that's great advice. The next question, out of all the products you have worked on, which was your favorite and why?
Flutter rocks. Huge fan.
Cool. The next one, what are you most excited for after NMBD lands in stable?
Are you so of course, I can't give you a specific guarantee or date for null safety, which is our previous code name was NNBD, which is non-nullable by default. And I'm glad we picked the null safety name instead, because that's a mouthful. So we just entered beta. It wasn't too long before that when we were in technical preview. And if you were a betting person, you might be able to choose some reasonable time in the future between when we generally go from betas to stable versions. I will make no promises or guarantees, but my guess is if you did guess, you'd be pretty close.
Cool. Last two questions. You have mentioned the developer relations team a few times. What do they do?
Developer relations, the job of developer relations is one of my favorite IT roles, actually. The job of developer relations is twofold. It's outreach, right? And that's things like code labs and blog posts and documentation and videos and conference talks. It's, let me show you, these are the talks that have code in them, right? They're actually using the thing. These are the speakers that can just flip up the code editor and start typing, right? Those are the developer relations folks. Those are the ones that really understand the product at the developer level, and they are developers, right? They are developers that work with the team to do outreach, education, inspiration, as well as inbound understanding of on the ground, hey, I've been working with a large set of customers, and the information about this feature is that they love it, except it needs this, or about this feature that they hate it because of this, or whatever. So on the team I'm on right now, they have a wonderful term for that inbound, which they call it customer zero, right? We lean on them as like the very first customer of these products, of these features. And they try them out and they go, that's not going to work. And let me tell you why. I try to do things that I know developers are going to do. And then, so they become customer zero, where they themselves are a proxy for their vast experience with the developers. And of course, they're also the ones that take it out with their outreach and say, hey, here's some education material about how to use feature X, Y, and Z. And then they get because they're the authors and the publishers of this content, they get direct feedback, and that all comes back to the product team. So developer relations is all about relating specifically, providing like a bi-directional communication with developers, between the developers and the product team.
Okay, cool. Before I ask the last question, I just want to share the results of the poll. So we are running a poll, then the question is, would you like to work for Google? 80% says heck yes, 20% said not really. So the last question is, because we have like Kotlin native for Android development, and now we can also develop Android apps using Flutter. So I think they are kind of competing with each other. So what's the future of each?
Well, I can't make any future predictions about Android, right? The Android team is a separate team at Google, and they have their own roadmap and their own predictions. Um, and you've already asked me roadmap questions about Flutter, which I refuse to answer. So I guess I'm fairly worthless there. But I can say that these are every operating system, Android, iOS, Windows, Mac, Linux, the web, right? They're always going to have their own native APIs and their own native SDKs. And those aren't going to go away anytime soon. And the future operating systems, they're going to have their own as well. You're always going to be able to write native apps directly against the operating system API. And Android has super popular operating system with an amazing, huge developer community, and they're not going away anytime soon. And if you want to write the tightest, most integrated native thing that runs on Android or any operating system, of course, the native API is always going to be the best way to do it. Flutter solves a different problem, which is how do you make it possible to build great, fast, native apps that you can take a single source code base and target multiple operating systems. So these things don't compete. They solve different problems.
Okay, cool, thanks. Yeah, that was the last question, and I'd like to thank Chris and Felix for your time tonight or this morning, for joining us and contributing to the mobile app community here in Brisbane. I'll hand over to Andrew now. Thank you guys.
Happy to. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, just like Anki said, guys, thanks very much for your time, and thanks also to everybody who asked questions. There's obviously a lot of questions there that we got through, and some really valuable information and insights, which hopefully everyone got something out of. Like I said before, we'll post all the links on our social networks. We'll also send you an email with all the information there, so if you want to follow up. You be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We are at Briz Mobile Dev. And yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody next year, hopefully in person. And have a great Christmas, a safe holidays, and yeah, thanks very much for everyone for participating. We really appreciate it.